Well, there are two parts to that. Okay, the two parts of the telephone collection. One is the the category that has at least one end is a foreign communicant. So in other words, you have foreign to foreign calls or foreign to U.S. or U.S. to foreign, the reverse. That category has yielded some benefits in terms of mapping the networks for terrorism or dope or what have you internationally. But when you get into the domestic side internally in the U.S., U.S. to U.S., that has contributed zero to any of it because it's not relevant to any of these international crimes or terrorism. Now, the vast majority of the bulk collection that they're doing in the foreign to foreign or foreign to U.S. side has absolutely nothing to do with terrorism or international crime either. So, and there are ways to target that to eliminate that mass collection, but they're not doing that. Well, yeah, it's just going to have to be the American people to standing up and and making sure their representatives limit the power of NSA. I mean, because they're being spied on too. This is a super steroid J. Edgar Hoover. This is somebody who has data on everybody in the U.S. government and in the U.S. and indeed around the world quite a bit. So it's a matter of when you accumulate that kind of knowledge, that gives you power over people to influence them one way or the other. I mean, if you can't influence them directly, you can use somebody that this is the old KGB principle. If you can find somebody that they care about, then you can attack them indirectly through them and force them to do what you want. So it's the way you manipulate people. That's a totalitarian process, and that's what our government's doing. They're doing it with the IRS against the Tea Party or the Occupy groups or religious groups. When you map out all these relationships, you have the social network of everybody in the world, so that lays out all the relationships in all of these communities that are active, either politically or religiously. Well, you know, it's obviously if the government is passing on this kind of information, since they're collecting everything they possibly can, if businesses use the internet or the telephones to communicate, then they're subject to capture and collection and processing, which means that data is available for the U.S. government in various departments to pass that on if they so desire. So the question is, are they doing that? I left in 2001, so I haven't been involved in that since then. And that's because they started spying internally on U.S. and dropped the idea of having a focused attack on problems on networks that were actually involved or related, closely related to terrorism or international crime of all sorts. So once they dropped that focused attack and then just decided to take in everything, including all U.S. citizens. I mean, first they started with U.S. citizens, I might add. And then they went to the rest of the world. So when they started that, I mean, I objected immediately, and that's why I left in 2001. So I don't know what they're doing with the data since then, but certainly the potential is there. If they're capturing all of this stuff across the networks, there's ample opportunity. And I say that when people have given power and all that knowledge, people tend this is shown down through the centuries, that people tend to use it sooner or later. So it's only a matter of who's using it, how they're passing it around, how they're sharing it, and they're trying to keep that very secret, just like they're trying to keep the use of the bulk collection by federal, state, and local police and international police organizations. They're also trying to keep that secret. But that's the real issue, why this bulk collection. They're supporting international policing. Well, if you capture the planned bidding on a given contract by international companies, then it gives you an edge as to what you should bid. So that would give you, an extra head up on everybody else in terms of going into the bidding. So. Yeah, so that's one thing, yeah. Otherwise, production rates, things like that would affect pricing and around the world of commodities and so on. So you could use it that way too. Well, I could, yes. Now, I certainly will try to do that, but it's going to be difficult because you have to, in order to evade things like implants or other kinds of hardware input into or added to your given processing, or any software added electronically through the network or so on. You have to get a pure network to begin with. So that means you have to create your own fiber optic network. So your own system with your own controls, and you have to scan everything to make sure there's no additional hardware, because that could be an implant, or additional software in anything that was inserted into your processing. Because that, for example, if you do that kind of insert into a switch on the public switch telephone network or the internet, that means you own the switch, which means that any data coming across there can be dual routed by that switch to you remotely. So you don't have to be physically where the switch is. You can be on the other side of the world and reroute all the data going through that switch. So that means you own the whole network. So if anybody sends anything on the network, you own it. You see, so if you put 50 to 100,000 implants around the world, you own the whole network. So it means you have to create your whole network yourself, or else build in unique encryption that's not shared with anybody, and use the existing network. But that gets to be a little difficult because you're creating. You have to have systems that are offline. In other words, if you connect your encryption decryption device to the network, you're vulnerable for attack, because they can come across the network, go onto your system, and download everything you've got, including all the keys and the processing and the network and the encryption algorithm and everything. So you have to have that as an isolated process that's got an air gap between you and any network. So in other words, it's just a standalone computer. That's the only, either that or you have a closed network. If you don't have a closed network, you're not secure either. I think they're going to try to keep doing what they are doing, right? And they're going to try to get Obama to say, yep, you guys can continue. But I think he's going to have a difficult time doing that because Congress is really upset. The reason they're upset is because they've been lied to by the intelligence committees, by the agencies, NSA, CIA, and by the administration. I mean, so that's why Representative Amash and Conyers attempted to unfund NSA and their activities in late July, early August. So that vote almost succeeded, and it was only because of the efforts of General Alexander and President Obama to try to stop it, right, to solicit support for it, that it didn't pass. It only missed it by 12 votes out of 435. That's not bad. So I think now with some more of the exposure that Snowden's given to what they've got, I'm sure that will pass. So there's a big threat there from Congress to take away the money. That's the way to stop them. You eliminate their money, but they can't do the job.